Oh, hey, come on in. Let's go talk about pocket knives. I've been getting some repeat customers lately, and that's a good feeling. I want people to be happy with the work I do and desire me to do more. So I guess you remember recently I did a couple of case 6232s for Kirk out of Ty, Texas, and he has sent me 2 more. These are case XX, so they're older knives. This one, of course, has some very unique handles, and he wants to keep those handles. Someone unfortunately sharpened the blades down too far. They're sharp, but they're just worn down. That's not the way they're supposed to look. Looks like they did it on a grinder or something like that. Even to the point that this one is sitting very proud. The tip is sticking up, and that's dangerous. This is the donor knife he got for me. It has very full blades. Again, the case XX. These are either in great shape or they're stainless. I'm not sure. There's no snap on this main, and it sits very proud. He thought it might have to do with a spring, but from the looks of it, I believe that tang is worn out just as it was on his knife that we repaired. That was one that was sentimental to him. So we'll probably, we'll take these 2 blades out and put them in this handle, which is what he wants. We'll probably do the tang repair on this one as well, because I believe that's the problem. Just from looking at it, that the end of the tang looks tiny. So anyway, that's today's project. Let's get into it. Thanks. Having a spring sticking out of the knife is the best way to get a razor blade inserted. When a blade has half stops, as this one does, the spring is the most exposed when the blade is open about a quarter of the way. So I'll insert a carpenter's pencil against the blade to keep it from snapping closed on my fingers while I work. The spring is already recessed on this knife, which serves the same purpose as having it extended. Either one makes it easier to get the razor blade inserted. So off camera, I've reversed the razor blades and also cut the center pin on both knives. Now I was thinking at first that I could cut just the pivot pins and remove the blades, and I could have, but then I would have no way to punch out those pivot pins to replace it. With both the pivot and center pins cut, I can fan out the knife and work on both sides of the liners. So now I will work to remove these blades and remove these stubborn pins as I go. Here is one of the many casualties of war when it comes to knife repair, a bent punch. The punches needed for knife work are so thin that they do bend very easily. I used to make my own punches out of broken drill bits. Those never bend, but they are brittle and they break easily. So either way, you just have to keep some spares on hand. Not only are some of these pins stubborn to remove, but so are the blades. When I compare the two blades, it's very easy to see how the tang is worn out completely on the donor blade, the one on the left. It's supposed to be flat on the end for a half stop, but it's worn out about as badly as I've ever seen. The original blade on the right has a good tang, but the blade is half gone from poor sharpening. So I will now repair the donor blade by plugging that pivot hole, reshaping this tang, then drilling a new pivot hole further up the tang. I will try a couple of steel nails until I find one that I'm comfortable in using to plug this hole. Now I'm using a 180 grit sanding belt to flatten the nail that I just peened. I'm being careful to sand only near the bottom of the tang. I do not want to sand off any part of the tang stamps. Now I'll begin reshaping the tang of this worn blade. That begins by grinding a flat spot on the end. Now I'm holding the two blades together to be sure that I get the flat spot with the same angle, even though it's not critical that that angle be exact, but since I have both blades in hand, it just seems like the right thing to do. Here is the comparison between the two blades so far at this point. Now I'll use my digital calipers to take careful measurements from the blade that has the good tang, and I'll mark where the new pivot hole should be on the blade I'm repairing. So the punch that bent earlier has bent again. So I cut it off and I'll ground the point down to use it as a center punch. I've recently lost my blue center punch, by the way, that I've been using. Unfortunately though, the imported steel of this broken punch cannot compete with the US-made tempered steel of the blade, and it really doesn't make much of a mark on it. I'll grind a new tip on the punch and try again. That still doesn't make much of a mark, but I think it's enough I can work with. I'll stop drilling and check my progress several times to verify that my drill bit has not begun to drift out of place. Now that I've drilled a hole all the way through the tang with my starter bit, I'll switch over to the number 42 drill bit to get the hole the exact size that I need. And of course, that's the very moment my drill's battery decides to give up. I put it on a charger and return with a corded drill. So now I'll line up the two tangs by the pivot holes to see exactly how things compare. I quickly see that I need to sand a little more off the square end of the tang on the one I'm reshaping, and then I'll mark the shoulder for the material that I need to remove from there. So now that I've marked the shoulder of the blade with how much material I need to remove, I'll start on that. I need to remove quite a bit of metal because of the severe wear to this blade, so I'll do quite a bit of it on the sander before finishing the work with a file. I'm temporarily installing these blades using drill bits instead of pins just to see how things line up. Well, that main blade is supposed to sit just a bit further back than the pin blade, but mine's still sitting forward of the pin. That means I need to remove some more material from the shoulder of that main blade tang. After I get that done, I'll polish the back of the tang off camera. This is something new that I wanted to try, and we'll see if it yields good results. Now that's more like it. cleaned this knife by hand rather than using the wire brush. I don't know, just because I felt like doing it that way, no other reason. Once everything is shiny enough, I'll engrave my initials and the date on the pile side liner. Quite often I'll have one pin fall out of the knife while I'm trying to insert a second pin. So now that I have this pivot pin in the knife, I'll go ahead and pin it just to hold it into place. But before I pin the pin too tightly, I will insert a 7/1000 inch feeler gauge to get that tension just right. Now I will use my small hobby vise to compress those back springs in order to get the center pin in place and under tension. The rubber jaw protectors that come with this vise have just about worn out. I'll use one on the jaw which touches against the blade well in order to protect these bone handles. I want the bare metal of the other jaw against the springs. Sometimes I can insert a pin by hand, and sometimes by pushing it in with pliers. But other times I have to persuade it a little bit with a hammer. Now that's always riskier, as it's easy to chip the bone near the center hole on the other side when using a hammer. But I had to, and it worked out well this time. I have good snap on both blades, and they're centered fairly well. The main blade has great smooth action, though the pin blade is still a nail breaker. The main blade has some slight wobble, so I'm going to adjust that pin with just a few light taps of the hammer. There, that's all it takes. Now I will cut and pin that center pin. I noticed before I ever started on the knife that rear pin is sunken in. Now nothing appears to be loose, but I'll go ahead and try to tighten it up just a little bit anyway.
Wow.
Later, I worked this blade just like this over 200 times, trying to make it easier to open. Doing that works the oil down into the joint and breaks in the friction between the blade and the liners. I'll wrap some scrap cloth around the blade, as you see me doing here, to protect these beautiful fingers of mine, because this blade is already sharp. I just cannot get the pin to disappear completely on the marked side top bolster. It looks better than some knives that I've done, but it still shows a little more than I wanted. Of course, the pile side, this side you see less of, oh, that pin disappears faster than the snow crab legs at a Chinese buffet. Beautiful day out here in the shop. Bright sunshine outside, so we'll see if I can get this knife where you can see it. I'm not sure how the focus or any of that's going with it, but yeah, they turned out very nice. So another K6232. This is the XX era. Yeah, it's got a little light spider webbing on the blade. It's hard to believe this knife was used enough to wear the tang out in it, and yet they're not wear the blades out or even have much rust or patina on them. That little blade, it's a nail breaker to even open it. Really struggle with that. Great snap. The main blade, I think polishing that tang after I did the work really helped. The snap and everything is just like I would expect, but the movement is a lot smoother than the last ones that I've done. They felt a little gritty, and this one does not. So I think polishing that tang is the key to making that a much better knife when I'll get through reforming that tang. So yeah, this one turned out great. I'm going to send it in. I believe that he'll be very happy with it. Thank you for watching. I hope y'all have a blessed day, and we'll see you later. Bye.